another edition of Let's Talk ETC. I have 3 guests with me today to help me give you guys an update on the latest ETC news. I have Kevin Lord of IOHK.
Hey, Chris.
I have Yaz from the ETC Cooperative.
Hey, how's it going?
And illustrious Bob Summerwill, also the ETC Cooperative.
Hey, guys.
Welcome, guys. So, why don't we jump right into it?
Well, something that's very exciting to me is sort of the relaunch of the Ethereum Classic.org website. So just before ETC Summit, in the few days before that, I realized that one of the problems that we'd had with the WordPress site, which Anthony put in place as one of his sort of great actions before I started at the co-op, in consolidating and getting to a really good quality website. But the problem was that it was a WordPress website, this situation of, oh, please, could you add my site? Please, could we add that? And, each of those being, stupid sort of email chase up things. And the setup that we had before was that you had the thing on GitHub and anyone can make changes. Anyone can submit pull requests. Anyone had the ability to edit the site. And that's how things worked for, a year and a half, from very shortly after the time of the DAO fork, through until whenever, I think maybe February or March 2018, when it switched over to that WordPress site. So, for example, Christian, yourself, you were a primary author of many blogs into that site. And that's what we can do again in moving forward. So I realized, well, we needed to go back to the old ways. It's just we needed it to look better. So I basically revived that old site just before Summit and announced that also as a means of bridging East-West disconnect. Basically because you have different websites. So, if you're in China, your website was either Ethereum Classic.cn, run by the ETC consortium, or Ethereum Classic Asia.org, run by Christian and his group. But, you're not getting the same information as people in the West who are seeing this, this basically community ecosystem authored site, which was then replaced by this WordPress one. So what we're back to now is having a single Ethereum Classic.org with all of the content of it on GitHub. Anyone can, suggest changes. But further, we're going to have localization. So that is just beginning now. We're in a position where we can have localized versions of any and all of that content. So people are already, have stuck their hands up to translate things into Mandarin, into German, into Russian. I think we've got French, Turkish, Greek, Spanish, Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese, pretty much everything.
It looks beautiful too.
It does look beautiful. So the other thing is that we had Chris Hitchcott, who turned up at the summit, who is a top-notch web design dude, and he said, "Oh, I can help you with that," and he has. He has been driving this stuff since October, and we've basically had this. Version 2 has gone live, where all of the work that's been brewing up since October is in there live now, and it looks fantastic. The content has been refreshed as well. We've done a pass through, clearing out old things which are not true anymore. There's still ongoing little edits to do, but essentially all of the structure is good, the content is good, the style is good, the workflow is good, and it's international as well. It's like an absolute knockout. So
really is.
No, we're live.
What people previously may have searched for on different websites, now this is like a clearinghouse. So like if you wanted the Chinese content, you can start at the website and then it'll quickly lead you to specific niche.
I mean, so the situation that you have is if you want a canonical landing site to understand and get started on Ethereum Classic, here's your answer. And whatever your language is, and that's important, right? You haven't got this situation of going, well, here, go to the Chinese website, and then the Chinese one will have, oh, what are smart contracts? What are wallets? How do you get started, right? That basic information, everyone is having to redundantly do that. And you don't want that, because it's just commodity. And I mean, none of this is to say, well, this is the one true website and you're not allowed to make your own websites, because obviously not. But basically saying, well, look, if you just want content, basic content on the basic shared information, shared facts, shared tutorials or whatever, here you go. That's it. This is it for the world, for everyone. And if you are, in some little country somewhere and there's no content for your language, what you can do is you can participate in this process and you can add translations for your language into the main site. You're getting the real stuff. You don't have to go and build your own website. You don't have to go through all of that. You can literally just add your translations in and well done. You're in the world. You're in the gang. You've got the same information as everyone else. And then people who've got more resources and do want to, build their own website, maybe they've got parts on that that's saying about events that they've got or local meetups or, projects that they're doing themselves locally or anything. Well, great. Yeah. Do your own website for that. But nobody should be in a position of saying, well, look, there's no basic information in my language and I've got to go and do this massive, overhead of an operation to build this thing up. That isn't the case anymore. You can just basically go to that website. You're going to get English language stuff for free. And then if anybody who speaks your language goes to the effort of doing translations of any of the parts, well, those bits are going to, sort of like turn first class for you. They'll be in your language. But if you don't, well, you get the rest of it in English and, just this workflow where everyone in the whole world can contribute.
Good. All right. So moving on, what's the next most interesting thing on your mind that you?
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me just talk through a couple of things, and then I'll let the others take the floor. The Ethereum Classic Cooperative has joined the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance and Hyperledger, and both of those, which I announced at Summit, have actually happened now. We've been accepted, and why those are important, and to explain the difference between those two groups. So the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance is a trade association of companies who are building things on Ethereum technology. It was founded in 2017. I was a part of that process. I was the co-lead architect of that. I spoke at I gave the technical talk at the launch event, and then I was the secretary of the technical working group, and then the vice chair of the technical steering committee. So I worked on EEA for a year, and the thinking there was, Ethereum technology is awesome, and it has lots and lots of use within enterprises. And it's maybe not exactly the same. It's maybe not public permissionless. You're going to have a lot of consortium chains or private chains or, running with alternate consensus, not mining. Look, we're just running with a set of validator nodes. I mean, basically the same as you have on Gourley and Coty. That for some use cases, there's no economic part to it. You just need validators to run a service, and then people are using that service. I mean, that's a very common kind of pattern that you'll have within enterprise. So here you go. Here's a set of banks. here's a set of supply chain companies working together, here's a set of insurers, whatever the case is, here are a set of mutually distrustful actors who wish to work together and want a single source of truth with an immutable record. Well, does that sound like anything we know?
All too familiar.
That's it. So really, the sort of seeing enterprises of, well, look at you, you big bad companies and your big bad governments, screw you. The reality is that all of the same patterns occur at all of the micro and macro levels because it's humans and humans don't trust each other, right? And that's the same even within an enterprise. You can say, well, why would you need a private blockchain for a single company? Have you ever worked within a large corporation? Do you think people in different departments, in different countries, in different groups trust each other? Of course they don't. They want to run their own nodes as well. Because it's like, oh, don't give it those idiots IT. They're going to screw up. They're going to lose all the data. Don't trust them. The developers need to be running it. And then the accountants are, no. We need control. So basically, all of this technology, it's the same pattern, from a private place all the way up to, obviously the maximum benefit is if you have a public permissionless worldwide global borderless thing. Well, yeah, that's brilliant, but the same pattern occurs in many other areas. So the EEA is basically working on an enterprise spec for Ethereum to say, well, what is the specification that enterprise Ethereum nodes should be able to comply to? And the reason for having a specification and a standard there is to avoid lock-in. Is to avoid a company saying, well, use our enterprise Ethereum client. Oh, and it completely locks you to us. And thank you, we've trapped you. So you don't want that, right? You want sort of a public specification that you can have multiple companies making one of those. And then the other thing is that really that's just a superset of what's happening already on public Ethereum. So, you have got some use cases of things running on public Ethereum networks, like for real, like you see here, we've done a bond between so-and-so, or we've issued a token, or what you see with EY is EY are running ZK Snark's private transactions on top of the public network as a second layer. Like that's a for real thing on the public network coming from, an accountancy firm that's 120 years old. Like that's how much recognition of this tech is for real. But the thing is with EEA, people would say, well, is it the same as, is it benefiting Ethereum? Is it benefiting F token holders? And the fact is that all of this technology is just, yes, you've got different chain instances, but there's nothing unique about the F chain, the F1 chain, such that, that's where all business should happen or anything. No, not at all. The majority of that enterprise stuff is happening on private chains between themselves. But the thing is, here we are coming in on the ETC side. Well, we believe, obviously, that the ETC chain is a way better place for business than F1. If you're running a DeFi economy, you want it on top of hard money with immutability and, security guarantees and long-term, mindset. So we absolutely should be engaged there. And the deal on Hyperledger is not a standards body. It's actually just an umbrella for open source projects. So the most interesting project in my mind that's happening inside there is Hyperledger Bisu, which was previously called Pantheon from the Pegasus group. So that's the Consensus protocol engineering group who spent the last 2 years building, a world-class Java client which runs Ethereum mainnet, can run all of these private consortium ones, is compliant with the EA spec, is permissively licensed with good IP policy, and runs under the mature governance of the Linux Foundation's, way that they do collaborative projects that they've learned over 20 years, things like the Linux kernel, they kind of know how to run projects. And what you now have is you have ETC support. So, because we funded it. So that's happened. I announced that we were going to look at that in September, and it's done. You can run the ETC mainnet off Bezu now, thanks to the work that ChainSafe have done on that code base, off the master branch. It's all been upstreamed. It's in there. And then there is a pending change, which is going to add Agatha support. And that is going to be done within a day or two. There's Mordor support in there as well. And there is Kotti support. So basically what we've got there is a world-class code base built by a team of 50 to 100 engineers in a mainstream language, enterprise friendly, F and ETC compliant. It's like glory. So there we go. I'm going to stop talking now.
Can I just add a few things to that? So if anybody's interested, so JP Morgan and Friends have made a permissioned client based off of the Geth client called Quorum, or that EEA is supporting. So people can look at that. They essentially ripped out the proof of work consensus code and made it supportive of the permissioned network architecture. And then also I had a question for you, Bob, about the Hyperledger, this Java client. I'm aware that the Hyperledger stack itself has a component called Burrow, allows you to run Ethereum contracts on the Hyperledger stack. How does this Java code that you're talking about, how does that relate to Burrow?
Yes, I can explain this very clearly because people have a lot of misconceptions about what is Hyperledger. Because there's three very common things which people think are Hyperledger and are the same, and they're not. Number one is the Hyperledger Fabric code base. So that is an open source project which was primarily built by IBM and contributed into Hyperledger, so basically like gifted to the Linux Foundation. Thank you, Linux Foundation. You're going to now run a collaborative project that we will participate in, but open to, all takers to build this, it's called Fabric. Now, IBM have a commercial offering using Hyperledger Fabric called IBM Blockchain. So IBM Blockchain, is that code base or, a premium enterprise version of it running on IBM Cloud and its, and its support contracts and all of that, right? Basically most people who say they are using Hyperledger are actually commercial customers of IBM Blockchain's commercial offering. That's what they really mean. The core of that, though, is this open source project called Hyperledger Fabric. That is one of about 5 or 6 different projects within the Hyperledger project, which is an umbrella for a variety of different blockchain projects. So Fabric is the most well-known of them, but usually when people say, are you using Hyperledger, they're being incorrect in at least 2 different ways. What they actually mean is, are you using the Hyperledger Fabric code base, which is, an alternative to using Ethereum, which is very, very popular in, in enterprise space. The other one like that is Corda. So R3's Corda is another competitor. So really the competitors that you have, the primary competitors in enterprise space are using enterprise Ethereum, a number of different clients available there, using Hyperledger Fabric. There's only a single implementation there, which lives within Hyperledger and is primarily maintained by IBM. But I think they're down to about 50% of contributions now. There's lots of other companies that are building on that code base. So say Oracle, you can do Oracle blockchain. You can be a customer of Oracle blockchain, and that uses Hyperledger Fabric as well. You can run Hyperledger Fabric nodes on Microsoft Azure's cloud. So that's the way to see it, is that you've got this open source project at the bottom, and then there are a number of commercial offerings on that. On that Fabric side, you've only got the single implementation of the code base, but you've got multiple commercial offerings using that. On the Corda side, you've only got the one implementation, which is Corda. You've got a premium edition of Corda that you can buy, Corda Enterprise. But there's only one vendor. All of this is coming through R3. There isn't an alternate implementation of Corda. There's no Corda spec. And that's the same on Fabric. There's no Fabric spec. But when you come to the Ethereum side, it gets an awful lot more interesting, because you have the EEA, working on an enterprise spec, but you've also just got the public spec, right? You've got the yellow paper and everything. So what you have with Burrow is super interesting. So what happened there is our marmoty friends, Preston Byrne and co, they originally had a company called Eris that then got renamed into Monax, and their product was first called ErisDB, and then it was changed into being called Monax, and then they contributed that to Hyperledger as Hyperledger Burrow. And what that code base was, it was the first sort of like fork, really, of Ethereum. So what you had with Monax was a company that was created by lawyers. It's a technology company founded by lawyers who were interested in smart contracts. They were like, wow, this Ethereum virtual machine and smart contracts would be awesome for doing legal tech. But we don't want tokens, screw tokens. An ETH is probably in legal security. And so what you have there was with Burrow, you have an Ethereum virtual machine, which was a fresh implementation written in Go of an EVM, but it was never mainnet compatible. It used Tendermint and does still use Tendermint. Tendermint actually got created within Burrow, and that company then spun out later as Tendermint and then Cosmos. So what you have with Burrow, when that got contributed in, was here is an EVM, like a permissioned EVM that's been running for several years, and you can run stuff with it. What then happened, because it was within that Hyperledger umbrella, is both IBM and Intel were like, ooh, maybe we can do a bit of a mashup here. So what happened first was that the Sawtooth, the Hyperledger Sawtooth project, which is, another variant again, which Intel had made and contributed in, they mashed that up with Burrow so that you could run a Sawtooth setup, but with an EVM in it. And they called it Seth, Sawtooth Ethereum. The second one that happened was IBM went, ooh, a lot of people seem to like EVM and smart contracts and like things in Solidity. Wouldn't it be great if we could, take a Solidity smart contract and we could run it on Fabric? So what they did is they basically mashed together Fabric and Burrow. And they did some weird adapter thing to make that work, because Fabric is a UTXO system. It's not an account system. So you have to have some kind of like bridge, thing, some kind of adapter that makes, a UTXO system like look like it's got accounts, so that when you're within the Solidity, it's like presenting like you're modifying accounts, but then that's somehow shoving things into UTXOs. So that's what those are. Yeah, sorry.
Presumably there's an enterprise IT manager somewhere that's trying to decide, oh gosh, should I use EEA's Quorum? Should I use their stuff, or should I use this Burrow stuff?
That's continually happening. So, you see these sorts of bids around the world of, so-and-so bank is offering, taking bids for running our exchange or something like that. So usually what's happening is you've got R3 bidding, you've got IBM bidding, and you've now usually got some kind of mixture of Ethereum-y people kind of bidding. And that might be JPM, it might be like Pegasus and Consensus. It can also be Microsoft. Microsoft are very like Ethereum friendly. Just to cover Quorum, you've said a couple of times that Quorum is like backed by the EA. That's not actually true. there was talk at the start of perhaps JPM were actually going to contribute that code base into EEA and we'd collectively maintain it. But that wasn't done, basically because when we founded the EEA, it's like, well, don't compete with your members. The members are building these things, so don't have one of your own. That's a really bad pattern. And that, incidentally, is the bad pattern that happened at the Ethereum Foundation with Geth, right? Geth kind of became the blessed thing, to the detriment of Parity and others, right? Because it's the blessed children internally.
Sacred client.
Totally. So what you actually have in terms of EEA, enterprise Ethereum clients, are Quorum, built by JP Morgan, based on Geth. There's one called Autonomy, which is from Clearmatics, which is also a Geth variant. There's AxeCore from Axioni, which is another Geth variant. And you also have Besu, from Pegasus, but now within Hyperledger. And the other one that you have is Strato from BlockApps. So when at DevCon 1, when they announced, hey, blockchain as a service on Azure for the first time, here you can run Ethereum nodes on the Azure cloud, that was using Strato, which is a Haskell client, but it was enterprise grade from the very start. What BlockApps did was they just worked from spec. They worked from the yellow paper and they just made a new client. They didn't talk to anyone. They just went and did it and made it. And then they partnered via Consensus. Andrew Keys did this deal that basically said, Consensus and BlockApps will work with Microsoft and we're going to do, hosted Ethereum nodes with Strato. So that is another variant. So you're going to have at least 5 different vendors who are going to be competing in this, Ethereum enterprise client kind of space. And some of those, like Bezu, they're going to run mainnets as well. Because there's no reason why you shouldn't. Something we said at the launch of that was there's no reason whatsoever why a suitably modular client shouldn't meet all of these use cases. Be able to run in all of these public and private ways with 3 or 4 different types of consensus, different privacy features, all of this, and that running in a public network is actually that's the simple thing to do. The harder thing is all of these other ones is these different BFT modes or privacy features or all of these things. So that's sort of the space is the decision that these business people have to do is really, are we going to go kind of with IBM? And you're stuck with IBM. You can never get sacked for buying IBM, but you might do soon. It's not so great. Are we going to go with R3, another vendor tie-in? Or are we going to go with one of a number of these enterprise Ethereum ones? And you're not going to get tied in. And you've got the tie back to the public chain, and you've got the same tooling and all of the enthusiasm and, all of the community that you have on the Ethereum side. So I think Ethereum wins, hands down. It's just that we haven't really quite got to that maturity yet of saying, here's the spec and here are the clients that are compliant to the spec. And we've got a certification program and, and it's mature and finished, like the whole public blockchain tech stack, the stuff's not quite finished, right? But it's so close.
Yaz, did you want to add anything, or any thoughts on that, or any other news you wanted to add? I didn't want to feel like you were left out of the conversation.
No, I don't feel left out. No, I think in terms of the EEA and Hyperledger, being part of that kind of organization is pretty exciting, and I think it would help UTC a lot in the long term to be on that table. But other than that, I think maybe it would be interesting if we cover KCHAC 256 and ProcPW talk that we had last week at ETC Mining Call.
Yes. Fill us in on that.
Yeah. So we had a conversation first about ProcPW, the programmatic proof of work. it was contributed by if def else. And the reason I proposed it as an ECIP is because the general sentiment in the ETC community was that we would reject ProcQW no matter what, because and that's probably like another topic for another like show, but like episode. But like ProcQW, like let's just say, has a lot of red flags, right? So yeah, I proposed it as an ECIP so we can officially, through the ECIP process, finally officially reject it as an ECIP with the community on board. Like I'd have a call about it and stuff. So one of the main takeaways from last week's mining call was us rejecting my ECIP for ProcQW. And with the exception that because nobody was championing it. So in the future, technically somebody can propose a new ECIP for ProcQW. However, it would be noted that it has already been rejected before. So there would be having a larger uphill battle to climb, right? And this kind of decision to reject it has been heard all over the ecosystem. It's been shared in the Ethereum community in the discussion about ProcQW. They noted that we rejected it. A lot of people who are anti-ProcQW in Ethereum, they retweeted a lot of the information about ProcQW being rejected, right? The second part of the mining call was about KCHAT 256. It's like the likely candidate for SHA-3. And Alex Sankov, he's the one who proposed it. So we had to call about it. There was a lot of concerns about it, like why should we change our mining algorithm if and the implementation of changing the mining algorithm is a really big step on the network, right? And it's totally correct. We don't have enough data about how KCHAT 256 operates in the wild, for mining, for an actual network. However, Alex still what do you call it? He created Astor testnet, which is the SHA-3 testnet for ETC, and I think what we can do in regards to the concerns about KCHAT 256 is we can expand and improve Astor as a testnet, and we continuously mine on it and monitor it. But given those concerns during the call, a lot of people, it should be noted that a lot of people were more enthusiastic about KCHAT 256, even though there's a lot of prominent vocal people in the community who are not really convinced. So it sort of feels like a 50-50 on KCHAT 256, but more enthusiasm about it, and more people are not married to not changing the algorithm at all. However, they would rather exercise extreme caution and gather more data and information about how such a rollout would be. Also, there's a concern about ASIC implementation. If we won't have ASIC implementation before a SHA-3 network we upgrade to a SHA-3 hashing algorithm, the worry is a lot of people can launch botnet attacks using their CPUs. So one important aspect of this is to try to talk to ASIC designers who would be able to design a SHA-3 ASIC for ETC.
So just if I could just, for the people that are wondering what's all the fuss is about. So there's some concerns with the current mining algorithm, or that miners of other chains can easily switch over, so that having an exclusive mining algorithm, some advantages security-wise.
Yeah.
One reason, had Alex on the show, one argument for KCHAT 256 is that it's cryptographically secure. Right? It was made by mathematicians, peer-reviewed. So if there was any concern about any issues with hash being reversible, that's vastly much more unlikely with KCHAT 56. And then the other idea I think this is what these prog PW, is that how you say it? I think what they try to do is they try to make something that is even more ASIC resistant. You have to run it on GPU, or the forces are very strong to push you towards that. And then whereas the Alex and the Ketchak 256 idea is to just accept the idea that ASICs are going to exist. And so security feature.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, I agree with that overall. I think like there's a lot of improvements that Ketchak 256 brings to the table. Basically, it's like you said, it's more efficient. It can like as a hashing algorithm itself. PW, the concern had been like becomes more memory hard, so more ASIC resistant. But if you read Bob Grau's audit of ProcPW, so the community, the overall ecosystem is split on his audit. Half of them, like the pro-PW people, are saying that his audit kind of proves that this is a good algorithm to be ASIC resistant. However, he has a very important caveat where he said there's a technique you can do to avoid the memory hardness, even though it's part of the algorithm, in your ASIC design. And that's a very important caveat because it means that, even though this is an ASIC resistance algorithm in theory, in practice, somebody can just hack it, just move, I forgot the specific thing, but it's like if you look up Bob Rao, RAO, audit for ProcPW, I think it's on the first page where he goes the summary, what are the pros and cons, right? So with Ketchak 256, there's a lot of efficiency brought. For me, I really don't care about efficiencies. I think these are just nice to have. For me, the main reason I'm very vocally supportive of it is because I really believe in Nakamoto consensus. And I think Nakamoto consensus, the most important thing is, you mentioned, exclusive algorithm. I think it should be not just necessarily exclusive algorithm, but it has to necessitate that we're the majority chain using that algorithm in order to fulfill Nakamoto consensus security requirements, right? Because if you read the Bitcoin white paper, even the abstract, he said if it he talks about, as long as you have a majority honest miners, mining that hash rate, that assumption can only be if you have a majority chain using that algorithm. But the reality is we're ETC. We're a minority chain using Ethash, probably 1/20th the size of hash rate size of Ethereum. So we're always going to be in the shadow of Ethereum miners who can harass the chain. We've noticed a lot of hash spikes and stuff. Now, changing the algorithm doesn't solve for 51% attack like what the Ethereum miners have been doing on our chain, but in the long term, what I think it does is it actually fulfills the requirements of Nakamoto consensus. We didn't design ETC from scratch. All we did was we resisted the DAO fork because of the important value of immutability in terms of transactions, right? And irregular state chain should never be implemented and bail out people. But the problem is that we inherited a lot of the bad decision making within Ethereum onto ETC because they're the same, with the only exception that we resisted the DAO fork. So we have to start looking at being more realistic. You're a minority chain. You want to continue long-term and proof of work. You want to have ETC last for the longest time possible. Ethash does not provide that. It's regardless what it's if it's efficient, less efficient, it's a majority chain used by Ethereum. So by definition, it doesn't fulfill the security requirement of us operating as a proof of work network. A lot of people would argue, but we're a chain about immutability and stuff, and I would agree with that. We are a chain about immutability, but immutability has many dimensions. And when it comes to the hashing algorithm, it's like a small gear in terms of proof of work. Proof of work can run on multiple different algorithms as a design concept, but the hashing algorithm, if it's not fulfilling Nakamoto consensus, which is another matter entirely, then we have an issue.
When you say it doesn't fulfill the Nakamoto consensus, do you mean like right this second it doesn't fill that and that's the problem? Because like, what about down the line?
No. It's literally right now we don't have like the Nakamoto consensus security design. We don't have it because it's just from the white paper. If you read the Bitcoin white paper about Nakamoto consensus, it requires us to be the majority chain using an algorithm. And that's my only gripe with the whole thing. Like, I mean, you could tell me like this algorithm has better X and Y and Z. I really wouldn't care. For me, it's like we have to be the majority chain mining that algorithm in order to, have a line like, secure, the proof of work network, have it like long lasting and any bonuses that come from any hashing algorithm like KCHAC 256 are beneficial for us in the long term. But these are like I said, they're nice to have, and the most important thing has to be Nakamoto consensus.
I think what Kevin was
Security,
was that in principle, ETC could grow bigger than ETH, and then it would solve the problem organically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and
like over time.
But
Till then, though, it's a concern.
yeah, but like
right this second, no.
right this second, no. But I like to be more realistic. I do believe ETC can overtake ETH1X at least. I don't know ETH 2.0 because it seems every day it's being redesigned and stuff. So I can't really comment on ETH 2.0.
And they're different.
Right.
They're really, yeah.
Yeah. But like ETC versus ETH1X, I just don't know. Like I'm not. I don't think anyone is good at predicting the future. What I can solve for is for the present. Right.
Well, actually, no. Kevin he gave me another thought, which is if they ever do switch off of proof, then we would automatically become the majority chain on ETH.
For sure, but we've been hearing that since 2015.
18 months.
Yeah, no, for 24. Yeah, every 18 months is coming. But like, I mean, if you look at the design of Ethereum, they had the difficulty bomb implemented since the very beginning, like 2015 when it first went online, because it's like a reminder to them that we should always we set the bomb and remember that we have to go to proof of stake. And now they're like, they totally forgot about the difficulty bomb. And right now they're rushing another hard fork after Istanbul, 1 month after Istanbul, to reset the difficulty bomb because everyone forgot about it. But it's been going on for now about 4 years and a half, probably even longer if you count when they're developing it before it went online, talking about proof of stake. And now it's anywhere close to being happening. Even some people, like in ETH 2.0, said even if you start staking or you become a validator or whatever, like when you have the beacon chain, you still have to wait another 2 years for your ERC20 token to be active on ETH 2.0. So, from what I understand, I think like you need at least a decade for ETH 2.0 to come around, right? I'm like, I think
That's a safe.
yeah. So I mean, I can't just I can't design or support things that are you're hedging it on the bet that ETH 2.0 is going to happen sooner rather than later. We have to be more realistic, is my opinion.
Yeah, I was talking about IPv6 as an example nearly 20 years ago and how it was just around the corner. So for people that know about Internet Protocol version 6, this switchover might be just like that, or just like nuclear fusion, where it's always a couple years away, right? But it's always a couple years away, and so you keep waiting and waiting. It seems to quite get here. All right, so
It could be.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that about IPv6. Like, I know that they're rolling out, but I don't know about that aspect. I'll read more about it.
All right, so Bob, what else do you have for us? What other?
Hey, just one other point about the code audit there on ProgPow, which is another piece that people repeatedly get wrong. Is it's like, well, don't talk about the people, just look at the code. Look at the code. If we just audit harder, that'll be the answer. Now the thing is, you can audit the algorithm. You can't audit the schematics for the hardware that people build. right? That it doesn't matter how hard you audit, that doesn't stop people from having hidden optimizations. It doesn't stop them doing an ASIC boost. And what you've got really is here is a proposal of a change of hashing with $1.2 billion a year at stake. That's how much is being steered here by the outcome. That the ProgPow proposal is coming from 2 unnamed authors, a group of 40 people behind that who are also unknown, with gigantic economic things at stake. So the thought that you can just audit the code and that's enough is just beyond naive, but that's where they're at. So I'm very glad it's been rejected for ETC because it's just crazy.
I think there's, hey Bob, I was going to ask, so I think there's this really big, gap in what is the real issue with ProgPow. I mean, personally, I couldn't tell you the exact reason, besides different stories and stuff like that. But can you maybe tell the audience why it's maybe it's not secure, or what is the crux of the problem?
So many different levels.
Okay.
So most fundamental level, ASIC resistance is just stupid in the first place. So we shouldn't even be doing any of it. It doesn't make sense for anyone. That's the main thing. Number 2, if you're looking to do an ASIC resistance thing, it looks like a poor answer for that anyway on a pure technical basis. Thirdly, just IP risk of the fact that you don't know who this stuff is coming from. It could have patent claims. It could have, copyright issues. It could have any kind of crap. You don't know who it's coming from or anything. The fact that there's huge economic incentives for people to cheat here, it's a huge risk. That change just in itself, right? The steering that you have going on, and the fact that the people proposing it, Christie in particular, has got a documented history of cloud mining scams, exit scams, fraud, and was working for a company which, is tightly tied in with Calvin Ayre and Craig Wright, who, you look at what's
the best people.
Well, if you're looking at patent stuff, who's doing patents trolling? Craig Wright.
Right.
Great. It's just, do you want a stinkier proposal from a stinkier group of people? Do you want any more risk? There's nothing I can imagine that's got more risk than this for anyone that takes it on. It's absolutely just, the wrong thing to do in the first place, a bad implementation even of that from the worst people with huge economic incentives. It's just at least 4 different ways. It's like the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bob, this is why I'm glad you're here to chat with us. Can you just briefly say why you think ASIC resistance, even in general, not even thinking about POW, but in general, why in principle it's a bad idea why you don't think it can?
Let me read out some quotes. So I made an ECIP about this. Or started making one, I did make one. So I made an ECIP that still hasn't been merged, and I may or may not push forward with it. But let me read out, some quotes here from Summit. So I quote: "ASIC resistance is a myth. The ETC ecosystem rejects this myth." This was the thing I was, wanting to put forward as an ECIP. "This ECIP seeks to bring certainty that the decisions around ETC mining are not being guided by an easily disprovable myth, but by the application of science, measurement, and facts, not subjective personal opinions. Rationale: the ETC project inherited both philosophy and implementation decisions from the Ethereum project, which are in conflict with the immutable, decentralized, unstoppable philosophy and ethos of ETC. The first break which ETC made against such inheritance was with the monetary policy, where the clear lack of monetary policy in Ethereum, while not problematic for the F2 world computer, was a huge problem for ETC, which is, Bitcoin with state and smart contracts. because this project needs a hard money basis. Getting to human consensus on the monetary policy was hard because the change was in conflict with a mutability doctrine, because changing consensus rules in any way is very problematic to some people. But monetary policy was seen as something where there was very broad consensus that the inherited lack of monetary policy was a major problem for ETC. Breaking immutability in that way so that immutability could be preserved with respect to monetary policy on a multi-decade basis moving forward was seen as a worthwhile trade-off. ASIC resistance is another instance of a bad inheritance, which could be fixed so that ETC ecosystem participants have multi-decade certainty around mining as well as about monetary policy. And I put in a few links, and then here's some quotes from the summit. So this one is from Nishant Sharma, who's head of international PR and community relations at Bitmain, and who spoke on the mining panel. He said, an important thing to clarify here is when you say ASIC resistance, those people who are for ASIC resistance, they're not against something called ASIC. They're against something which is a custom hardware which is more efficient than the hardware available to the masses or to general hardware. So I do believe ASIC resistance in that way is futile, because there will be some custom hardware always. If you have a coin which is worth mining, then someone will always find a more efficient way of mining it, whether it's ASICs or some other way which gives them an equal advantage that ASIC cannot. For example, maybe I live in a country where I have a good connection to the government and I can get almost free electricity. Now I'm almost 1,000 times more efficient than anyone else without even buying any ASICs. If you're against ASICs in that way, you're against competition. And Henry Kwon, who's the CEO of Epic Blockchain Technologies, who are a Toronto-based company who are making ASICs, and he's got like a multi-decade history at ATI and AMD. He says, I think ASIC resistance is more of a philosophy than a practical approach you can implement. Because if you look at things, GPUs are ASICs, CPUs are ASICs, the blockchain processors that we use are ASICs. Fundamentally, the philosophy behind ASIC resistance has been to make things memory hard. So what you end up doing is you're buying GPUs primarily to be ASIC resistant. You pay a lot for memory, and inherently the hash rate is a lot slower. Philosophies around ASIC resistance are that it's widely available. You can go to AMD and buy these products, but ultimately that's not a good mining solution, because you can see in today's world and very shortly that GPUs are not profitable, and that as technology moves along, the GPUs will be dwarfed by ASICs. And something Henry said more recently, and I want to get this out to the Ethereum community as well, he says when ProgPow is implemented, it's going to make 2/3 of existing GPUs unprofitable for everyone. Basically, because what it's doing is it's making NVIDIA GPUs 3 times. It's giving them a 3x advantage over AMD on current F hash. So that's how much of a steer this is.
You need a top of the line GPU. They make it so memory hard that you're saying that kind of.
Well, what it's going to be when you have ProgPow. Okay, you want to remain competitive, do you? Well, all of that investment that you've made into AMDs, which is the majority of Ethereum mining. yeah, rubbish now. Right, go and buy some new NVIDIA hardware. Well, who might want that to happen? NVIDIA. And then the other thing is, okay, if you fall for that and you're like, oh, well, I guess I'm going to replace my rig with an NVIDIA one now so I can stay in the game, you assume that that's going to work as well. If you've got covert optimizations in that NVIDIA hardware, which it looks like is the case, well, good luck.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Good luck. You can't compete. Well done. Calvin Ayre has stolen $1.2 billion worth a year from Ethereum that you can use to money launder. Well done. Well done, boys. Clap your three. Good job.
Right. So moving on. Do we have anything else that we want to add?
Just to touch on that, I remember when ASIC Boost came out in the press, that was a really big deal in the Bitcoin network. So if something like that were to happen on the Ethereum side, I think it would be equally as big of a deal. Bob, do you?
It's like it would be like a Volkswagen emissions scandal. There you go, big public company, Nvidia. Oh yeah, they just completely did a collusion and cheat and screwed everyone. Well done. They screwed all the customers and they screwed the markets. Brilliant.
So, anything else we need to talk about, or you'd like to talk about, Bob or Yaz or Kevin?
When ASIC Boost came out and everything, eventually it started. I don't know if it was ever open sourced and people actually got to look at it, but more it was. I think you could download it or something, and then other people actually got to use it, and now you can actually download it if you have like a Antminer or whatever. So if they did something similar in ProgPow, do you think they would also either be forced to go down that route to sort of make it public and make it fair, so to speak? Do you think that would even be a possibility, Bob?
I'm sorry, could you ask again? I just missed what you said.
Yeah, so with ASIC Boost, it was a really big deal coming from Bitmain, but then as time went on, they started offering it in software updates for their miners, for their machines, to sort of even the playing field. And I'm pretty sure it's more openly available now.
It was the fact that it was covert. It was the fact that it was covert that there was the problem, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the other market thing to say here is that both Bitmain and Canaan, the major ASIC manufacturers, they are both in the process of IPOing in the US. So they are basically subject to the SEC now. So what you've seen happening over the last year or so from Bitmain is Bitmain have really, really, really cleaned up their act. Basically, because they're going to be a public company, right? They can't mess around anymore. So what you have is all of that China fear it's wrong now. It's out of date. So you've also got this implicit racism of saying, well, a good American company, they wouldn't cheat you. Right, because American corporations are so credible. Like no Western corporation has ever done anything corrupt or bad, right? So, but what you have is like, those Chinese companies, don't trust them. Here, look, use ProgPow and keep it with the good American GPU companies that you can trust. You can trust Intel, you can trust Nvidia and AMD. Well, you probably can, but can you totally? Is that really a good basis for your decision making? Basically, racism, not so good, really. So actually, I trust Bitmain and Canaan an awful lot more than I trust Nvidia right now. but really, what
do
you
think they'd be forced to sort of make their advantage public, like ASIC Boost was,
Yeah, I mean, I think if it gets discovered, if they, if you have a whistleblower, if you have some investigator that can prove that there's a hidden, that there's hidden optimization in there, then it's going to absolutely outcry. They're going to get murdered. So in general, I think that the same kind of transparency, quality things which you see happening from Bitmain and Canaan, you're going to have a social expectation that AMD and Nvidia and Intel and anyone else that builds any of these things, you've got to give people some confidence that you are operating, with integrity, that you haven't got, these hidden optimizations and that you're secretly mining yourself. And also just simpler things in terms of supply. There was lots of kind of like supply shock, right, over that last little period where it's like, there's a new ASIC coming out. Can I get my hands on it? When's it happen? Because when those come out, they really invalidate, the economic model of a lot of the existing miners, right? So you need to have real, well, hey, here's the roadmap, and everyone knows that the new model is coming about this date, and that, you're all going to get fair access to it, because really, like, as both Henry and Nishant said there, what people have got a problem with, it really isn't, hardware is evil. ASICs are evil and GPUs are angelic, any more than hardware is any different from software. The problem is business models and, unlevel playing fields, information asymmetries, basically, oh, I've got an inside line, we're going to get all of the hardware 3 months before our competitors because I greased the palm of, my mate in the supply side or whatever. It's all that stuff that you want on.
And have it be predictable and fair.
Right. It's saying basically, that if you are taking part in the mining ecosystem, that you're doing so in a level kind of way, right? That you've really got a model which is, it's kind of like running a utility. Hey, I'm sort of a utility provider that's providing electricity or, internet access or whatever, right? That's the kind of model that you want, right? Not like, I got mining equipment and now I'm a multi-massive millionaire, It's like, well, who the hell wants that? Does that advantage, is that good for ETC? That you've got people just, going, well, I managed to get the mining equipment, faster. So now I sucked $10 million out of the ecosystem. You really want a model of saying miners are providing security for the network. Great. And you want that ability to contribute to that to be available to a very wide set of people. And you can never make it a completely level playing field. Some people live somewhere where there's cheap electricity, have got more access to capital, so can buy, large farms and have, efficiencies of scale that way. You can never eliminate those. But what you do want to eliminate is basically cheating, fraud.
From the get-go.
Yeah.
So let's move beyond mining now. I think we've covered that pretty good. So besides mining, what else? What other news items?
I think that was most of it. Wouldn't you say, Bob?
Talk about the forks. Let's talk about
the upgrades.
Agartha and that's it.
So yeah, Guard is set up for what, January, early January Q1 next year.
We just had a fork. Another one coming.
I think Bob might be muted.
Bob, we can't hear you.
I'm trying to give everybody else a chance to talk. I've talked way too much.
Okay, Yaz, do you want to fill us in on the hard forks?
Yeah. So Agartha is gonna be in probably around mid-January to probably the third week of January. It's hard to estimate it because timing is under 15 seconds, give or take. But yeah, so Agartha hard fork is following the Atlantis hard fork in September. Is where the Atlantis hard fork on ETC was the equivalent of the Byzantium hard fork on Ethereum. Agartha hard fork is the equivalent of the Constantinople hard fork on Ethereum. And one of the major things it brings, I believe, is Create 2 function. Some of the benefit of that is it opens up a lot of cool dApps and other applications to be ported to ETC. One of them is Connects, a sidechain which relies on the Create 2 opcode. And
state channels. I mean, so yeah, Connects Connext is one of many state channels implementations. But yeah, Create 2 lets you do counterfactual instantiation. And I'm not going to explain what that is, but if somebody wants to search for that, counterfactual instantiation is the feature that's enabled by Create 2. I think essentially Create 2, what it's doing is it's kind of like giving you predictability of where the thing is going to get created. So you can sort of have this ability of creating an account later, and you know where the thing is going to go. Like it's deterministic where the thing is going to go, but then you only create it if you need it. So then there's all kinds of fancy game theory you can do about saying, well, if there was a problem, we could create the thing and do a transaction and resolve it. But you don't have to until there's a problem. So you can do all of this like game theory stuff where things get resolved without actually doing anything on chain at all.
Is that what would you say the progress is on state channels for ETC? Is it? I read somewhere it's production ready, I think. Or
so there's two working production state channels implementations. The first one is called Fate Channels, which was done by Funfair. So Funfair, they're doing like casino games, right? So that's running on Ethereum right now.
oh,
So casino games, and then it's like, right, you want to do microtransactions, right? You don't want to do a
Perfect.
transaction for every dice roll or whatever. So that works right now. You don't need Create 2. We can actually do Funfair on ETC mainnet right now. When we go through Agatha and we've got Create 2 as well, that will let us use Connext. So Connext is the state channels implementation that's used for Spank Chain. So same deal. You need to do microtransactions for paying, taking your cam girls. It's like a real use case, and and that actual real in production people paying money for real right now stuff will be possible on ETC as well. So Stephen McKee was really pushing that on the Discord a few months ago, and we'll be able to get to that. The other thing is there's a whole bunch of other state channels implementations. If you go to statechannels.org, there is basically a bunch of them that are starting to work together now to standardize how state channels work, so that all of those state channels implementations that they have are going to be interoperable. But right now, already, there's at least that one which you could run today on ETC. You'll have 2 in January, as in 2 that are actually in real life in production that we could have instances of as well. And there's a whole bunch more, which we will be able to run as of January as well. So if let's have a look at the other ones you got there. So other people in that group are like what have we got? Yeah, L4 are doing state channels. Those are good guys. Funfair are in this. Connext are in it, but also Seller, Perron, Pisa, Prototypal, Magmo. Don't know who all these are, but other people doing state channels. The ones that are notably not within this are Raiden. So Raiden, Raiden was the poster child, right, for state. Yeah, they haven't really worked. So Raiden doesn't really work yet, and they've basically been overtaken by a bunch of these other people that actually have made things that work. And it could well be the case that Raiden will work and will. You don't have to wait. 10 people compete. Whoever does it first, great. We'll use your stuff.
Bob, do you have any thoughts on who's going to win the Darwinian struggle and who looks like they have the best team and the best code in state channels?
State channels. So Connext to leading. Spank Chain's where it's at. We should get Spank Chain on ETC.
Right, so look at Connext then.
Look at Connext. But yeah, I'd love to see Spank Chain on ETC. I'd love to see Moloch DAO on ETC. Moloch DAO on Mordor.
Quite fitting.
So, have I forgotten anything, or have we covered pretty much everything that we wanted to cover this time?
I think maybe just
one more thing we could talk about is Azatlan. We can talk about the next fork, which which is due in March, which is probably the most important fork, I think, in ETC's history, because that's the fork where we catch up.
Catch up with the opcodes of ETH?
Correct. And actually, we become leading, not following. And I'll let others
Sort
talk
of
to
like
that.
that was sort of like one of the major goals with these latest network upgrades, right? Was to reach feature parity with Ethereum. No.
That's right. So, I mean, Agartha that we're going through by January gets us up to Constantinople opcodes. And then what we have is, the latest is Istanbul. So Istanbul is the current latest fork, which is just about to go live on Eth1. I think it's sort of mid-December that activates on mainnet. Bringing the Istanbul changes into ETC, though, that's where it gets tricky, because some of the changes that they made in Istanbul are not backwards compatible. You may have seen, CoinDesk article talking about the fact that 600 Aragon smart contracts got broken in Istanbul. They're going to be broken because they're repricing gas in a way which breaks deployed scripts, and they don't care.
This was our conversation about versioning.
Yeah. So really about versioning and backwards compatibility. So maybe somebody else, Yaz, or someone wants to talk a little bit to some of the proposals that Way has put forward.
Yes, do you know about that? About the idea of having different versions?
I know from a high level. Basically, it would allow, if you have any changes in the gas that can break backward compatibility on deployed contracts, like we can see in the case of Aragon, a lot of Aragon contracts on Ethereum would be, broken with the new Istanbul changes. The Way's proposals basically, you sort of can target between two different account versions, what's before the fork and what's after. So any contract that is deployed before the fork can use the pre-existing original gas prices for like specific function, and anyone after the hard fork would have to use the new gas prices. So it doesn't break backward compatibility that way. It's sort of a workaround. It's definitely a good proposal because backward compatibility should be a very important culture, at least in software development. And if you're building so-called unstoppable applications that are not backward compatible, it's like the height of irony.
Right. Oh, you just said something interesting. So the new smart contracts wouldn't be able to use any version they want. It's just the existing smart contract.
Yeah. So anything before the hard fork happens would still operate under the same pre-existing condition, and any new changes, let's say if you're Aragon and you redeploy a new contract with the same exact code as the one already deployed, it would have to follow the new rules, because you would be deploying it after the hard fork. But any of your existing contracts that are already deployed wouldn't have to be affected too much by it. So it doesn't really break any contracts.
It's like with laws, right? Do you make a new law and then retroactively apply it and say a load of things that happened in the past? Oh yeah, we're saying that's not allowed anymore, and you're now a criminal. I mean, obviously, what's happening here is not, saying you're a criminal, but it is literally breaking the contract that you made. When these smart contracts, there was this either implicit or more than implicit understanding that, immutability. I deploy that thing. I want the thing to run forever. You don't go and break it on me. Exactly what's happening here. And the silly thing is that it's very easy to solve. And the way that you solve it is what you're doing here is like a major version of something. It's like, hey guys, there's a new release coming out, and it will be different. But your old stuff will still work. Your Windows 7 apps are still going to run on Windows 8. There's going to be some kind of backwards compatibility thing that makes that still work. And, you encourage people to move to the newer versions, but you can't mandate them. And that's exactly the kind of thinking that's happening there on Ethereum, is saying, okay, we've worked out some better values for gas, right, that make the thing run better. Well, brilliant. So apply them to new stuff. Don't apply them to everything retroactively and break existing smart contracts. Are you insane? But that's what's happening. And it's a very easy fix. Is literally saying existing deployed accounts have the existing costs, and anything that is applied after the hard fork gets the new pricing. What's the problem? It's an if statement. It's so simple. It's a simple engineering, solution. And then the thing is that the proposal for how the versioning should work, that's been on the brew for a year. Way made it a year ago. That's how long that proposal's been around. It's implemented in all of the clients. It's in Bezu, it's in Parity, it's in Geth. They're just not using it because they don't give a shit. But we can.
I had no idea.
We give a shit. So when we, get to this Azatlan fork, I think what will happen is, that we're just going to use that. Way's going to do the job because he's clever. He's not stupid. And that stuff exists. And so we'll just apply those EIPs, but, in a different flavor. We're just going to wrap an if statement around them to say, yes, we'll apply these new prices conditionally and only forward from this point and not backwards. Now, gas repricings, there's two buckets that they can fall into. Is this, this was a bit too expensive and, it should be a bit cheaper, and, like non-emergency things, which is what this appears to be. You do have a category which is emergency pricings, right? This is a denial of service vector. This is the Shanghai attacks, right? At that, and you're like, oh, look, we badly repriced it, and the consequence is that the network is going to die. Okay, at that point, yes, you do unconditionally reapply those, apply those costs, because those changes are going to break the backwards compatibility for those attacking scripts, which you absolutely want them to break that guarantee. And maybe at that point, you are going to break some other things that, implicitly depend on that aren't attacking scripts, but, implicitly relied on those. Now, if you're doing that kind of change, an emergency save the network change, then what they're doing for the unconditional application is fine. That doesn't appear to be the case for any of these things within Istanbul. There's been complete leisure of applying this. Istanbul was meant to happen 6 months ago. So there's obviously no crisis. But it's like, well, we're not totally happy with how the versioning works. And so, so we're not going to do anything yet. And for these Aragon scripts, well, they can always reapply. They can just redeploy anyway, right? So, they're big boys. They understand. We'll just do it. And do you know what's actually happening? Aragon are leaving because they've got shat on. I mean, they're not leaving just because of that. They do need more scaling. So they were looking first at Polkadot. Can we run Aragon on Polkadot? And what they're actually doing is they're doing it on Cosmos. They're going to run on Ether chain. So they're making a new chain. They're making a new L2 chain, like an application chain for Aragon. And that's fine. There you go. That makes sense. Here, they need more throughput. They need more whatever. Great. That they're going to run the majority of their stuff for governing themselves. As in the Aragon instance for Aragon. That dog fooding instance is going to move to this Aragon chain at L2, and they want the Aragon smart contracts to be deployable to all EVMs. So they've said, that they would like the stuff to work on ETC as well, and we'll work with them and try and make that happen. But yeah, they're leaving the F1 ecosystem, both because of that scaling issue, but also because they've just been mistreated. It's like you're breaking our smart contracts, which are one of the premium applications of the technology, and you're just going to break them like bonkers.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right. I
And
was
so, oh, go ahead.
going to say that. So, are we at the end? Have we covered everything?
Looks like it. I would just say people make sure you upgrade your nodes. Get ready for Agartha.
And that's in all the clients, parity, Geth. Get the latest.
Yep. So multi-geth, think classic geth also. Bob, is that right? And then Bezu and
Yeah,
parity as well.
there's 4 clients for Agartha. Parity, Ethereum, multi-geth, and Bezu are the main ones. You've also got classic geth kind of cobbling along and not quite dead yet. This is going to be the last hard fork which it's supported for, it seems. So by Azatlan, it's not coming. It's not coming to the brave new future where we are, we're protocol compatible. It will be clapped off into its retirement very shortly. But yes, all of those work. If you get the latest of any of those, upgrade your clients. Please do, yes. All
right. Well, thank you, all 3 of you, for joining me. Thanks for giving us the news. I'm sure appreciate it. Until we meet again. Have a great Thanksgiving.
You too. Thanks, Chris. Bob, see you guys.
Thanks, guys.